Hi, I'm Ross Dugas with Scientific Financial. And in this case study, we're going to look at a younger family and we're going to utilize eMoney software to quantify the impacts of some of the decisions that they'll make. This presentation is titled Quantifying Smart Investment Decisions, a case study avoiding $500,000 of inefficiency. And I purposely use this word inefficiency rather than something like mistakes. There's a lot of financial decisions we'll have to make. And sometimes we make the perfect decision, sometimes we make a good decision, sometimes we make a bad decision. There's really not an expectation that you're going to get all of these right. Very, very few people can do that. These are complex financial decisions. So we're just kind of approaching this from, there's some inefficiencies that are likely to happen in your decision-making process. And we're going to be looking at some of those in this presentation. This is being recorded in September of 2024. But the concepts that we're going to be presenting and the learnings from this presentation should be relatively evergreen. So if you're looking at this in 2025 or 2026 or even beyond, everything still should apply for the most part. Meet John and Jane Dow. John is 43, Jane is 40, and they have 3 children, 10, 8, and 4 years old. Both work at Dow, and each have total compensation of $150,000 per year. Now, they have expressed a desire to retire before 60, and they want to retire together. So we're targeting 59 years old for John, 56 for Jane. Notice that John is 3 years older than Jane. For their investments and the purpose of the model, not exactly what we do in real life, but we're just going to keep it super simple for the model, where we're going to assume that they have 80% of their investments in stocks and 20% in bonds in their working years. And then after they retire, they're going to go to a very conservative portfolio with 50% stocks and 50% bonds. John and Jane met at the University of Texas, and they would like to provide for their 3 children to have the opportunity to go to the University of Texas. Currently, they haven't saved any money, but going forward, they would like to save $200 per month per child until that child is college age. Their current investments are relatively low. They only have $200,000 in a brokerage account, and they have not utilized their 401ks. Now, this is not an uncommon situation. There's a lot of people that don't take full advantage of their investing in their early years, but that doesn't mean that they're going to have problems going forward. John and Jane are just 43 and 40. They've got plenty of time to get themselves in a good financial position and prepare for their retirement. Social Security we can estimate based upon their incomes and their projected working history. And those projections for Social Security are a bit over $3,000 a month. So we're going to go a little conservative. We'll just put $3,000 per month each for John and Jane when they start drawing Social Security at their full retirement age of 67 years old. We're going to assume that the family has $5,000 per year in medical bills. That's not $5,000 out of their pockets. That's $5,000 per year that's being processed through the insurance. Some of that will be deductible, some of it will be co-pays, and so on. For living expenses, we're going to assume that they have $150,000 per year, and this will scale with inflation. The software is really good at that sort of stuff. Now, they're saying in retirement, the kids will be in their 20s. So they shouldn't really be on the books. We're anticipating that drops their costs a fair amount and that they can have a similar lifestyle in retirement for about $120,000. So John and Jane realize they're both in their 40s. They're ready to get serious. They want to get their financial life in order. They've decided that they want to start maxing out their 401ks. And any extra cash they have after paying for their expenses, they would like to invest that in a brokerage account. Now, John and Jane are going to have some financial decisions coming, and we're going to explore 4 of these in this case study. The first is when they invest in their 401k, should they invest in the Roth 401k option, or should they utilize pre-tax 401k contributions? Second thing we'll explore is how they save for college, whether they use just a standard brokerage account, whether they use something specialized like a 529 savings plan. The third thing, we're going to look at their medical decision, whether they choose to utilize Dow's low deductible health plan or whether they want to use Dow's high deductible health plan. And that high deductible health plan allows them to utilize an HSA, a health savings account. Fourth thing we'll look at is whether they do a traditional drawdown strategy. That's where you start by spending your taxable money first, followed by the pre-tax money, followed by the post-tax. So something like your brokerage accounts, then your 401k, and then your Roth IRA. And we're going to compare that strategy versus something that could be a little more strategic, like utilizing Roth conversions. So you may have noticed in this Explore section, we have some of them that are bolded in black and some that are in blue. We're going to consider our base case these 4 black options. So the black is our base case, and we're going to explore the impact of each of these 4 blue choices. I realize I just threw a lot at you, but hopefully this helps kind of solidify the base case to understand their situation. So they have $150,000 in compensation each, $300,000 as a family. And we're separating these into fixed and variable, and these aren't what we traditionally think as fixed and variable costs, but these are fixed in the model, and these are variable in the model based upon the decisions they make. So the fixed things in the model are going to be these blue portions. Their living expenses. They fix their living expenses at $150,000, and that'll scale with inflation. They've fixed their 401k savings rate at the maximum. So 2 times $23,000 a year, $46,000. And we fixed the amount that they're saving for college. $200 per month per child, which comes out to $7,200 in a year. And based upon their decisions, these variable costs are going to change. How much they pay in taxes will change based upon their decisions. How much they pay out of pocket for their medical costs will change. And notice this medical is $7,400, and we just talked about $5,000 a year, but that was $5,000 a year in bill processing. They still have premiums, and the premiums are included in this number as well. And of course, depending on the amount of or what decisions they make, they're going to have some variable amount of money left over. And to keep all of the cases comparable, whatever extra money they have, we're going to devote that to their brokerage account. And if they pay more in taxes and more in medical, they'll have less to send to their brokerage account. If they make decisions that pay less taxes and less medical, then they'll have more that they can send to their brokerage account. But in all cases, they're utilizing $300,000 of their income. Now we'll jump into the eMoney software, and this is eMoney's Decision Center. It allows us to provide some on-off switches for those 4 decisions we talked about, whether the money goes to the Roth 401k or to the pre-tax, how they save for college, whether they send the money to the taxable account or to the 3 children's 529 accounts, whether they use the low deductible medical plan or whether they use the high deductible with an HSA, or whether they want to use some Roth conversions rather than just a traditional drawdown strategy. And what we're seeing here is the lifetime portfolio value. So this is just the projected portfolio of their assets, of all of their investments. As a function of time, it builds up to about $2 million when they retire at age 59 and 56. And then it starts to decrease. You notice the slope of this tends to flatten a little bit when they get to be Social Security age, because now they have to draw down their investments a little less because that Social Security incomes are kicking in. And it extends until the end of the plan, which we've defined as 90 years old. So this is good news. These are just projections. And you notice this is linear projections, average historical returns for every year. That's not how the market's going to work. This is not exactly what's going to happen. The only thing we know about these models is that they are wrong. But that doesn't mean that they aren't useful. And I think this is very useful. And it basically says that the path that we're setting them on is a path with a decent chance of success to meet all of their goals. Now, the market might do much better and they get there much easier. The market may not do very well and they may have to work an extra year or two to put themselves in a safe financial decision. We don't know that. But the current path that we've set is a reasonable path moving forward. And notice that this is all defined in present value. I find that makes it simple because now we get to ignore the effects of inflation. If we did want to look at this on future value, you'll notice that the shape changes because inflation changes things. You'll notice that now their investment portfolio is around 3 million instead of 2, but it's effectively the same situation. But looking at it from a present value, we have a much better feel for the value of this amount of money, and I think it's much simpler to look at it from that perspective. Now, this is a lifetime portfolio value. There's a lot more stuff here. We could look at Monte Carlo, and you can see, average cases versus good cases versus bad cases and so on. But we're going to keep it pretty simple. We're just going to focus on this lifetime portfolio value with historically average returns. The first thing we wanted to look at is how they invest in their 401k. And by default, we have them in the Roth option. But if they were to utilize the pre-tax option, that is a substantial advantage. That's the much better choice for them. And the impact, which is just the choice, the clicking of a button, whether to save in the Roth 401k or pre-tax 401k, it's important. That has an impact of about $197,000 in present value. In today's dollars, that choice is worth $200,000. So the point I want to make here is that these are simple decisions. There's no extra work. This is a click of a button, but a very important click of a button. And if you're not sure whether you should be investing pre-tax or with Roth, I see some people that just like to split it 50-50 because they're not sure. This isn't the sort of decision that you just kind of want to make. It's a really, really important decision. It's a really impactful decision, and it's important that you make the right decision. So you can always seek out help to make sure that you get these things right because, as it shows, $200,000, extremely important. And the reason why that's so important is it gets into taxes. This is eMoney's tax analysis. And the eMoney software is really powerful. It's able to run a tax analysis for the couple's family for every year of their life. And we're able to compare our base case, which is utilizing the Roth contributions, versus the improvements, where we're looking at the pre-tax contributions. And it says regular federal tax, other income taxes. These other income taxes are payroll taxes. They're essentially the same for both cases. That's not where we focus. Where we focus is the regular income tax of $48,000 versus $37,000. That's a big difference. And that's because when we do pre-tax contributions, that's $46,000 that are not being taxed today. Now, that money will be taxed in the future. All money will be taxed, but the ability to have that money taxed in the future allows us to spread the income over more years to pay lower overall tax rates, and that can be very beneficial. And as you saw before, beneficial to the order of $200,000. So it's important to understand the tax code, at least on a high level. Federal taxes are progressive. And what progressive means is that as you earn more and more money, you pay more and more taxes, but you also pay taxes at a higher rate. This is 2024, married filing jointly. And you'll see that for the first $23,200, 10% of that money is taxed. And as you make more money, you enter a 12% tax rate. But it's not 12% on all the money you've made. It's only 12% on this $23,201 up to $94,300. And then if you make more money beyond this, now you start paying 22%. But again, not 22% on everything, just 22% on those dollars between 94,301 and 201,050. There's this progressive nature. So the more you make, you may be paying a higher percentage of those additional dollars. And one thing that may help you is just thinking about this visually. And I created a graphic, and hopefully this helps you. But it's this funny looking structure. And I've drawn this approximately to scale. So if we think about the money you make as liquid money, think of it as some liquid that's going to fill its container. Let's say we have $150,000 that we're pouring into this container. The first $29,200 is actually taxed at zero because that's the standard deduction. That's not taxable income. So that's below the level. So we're going to fill up $29,200 of liquid money, fills up this standard deduction. And then after that, we get to our first dollar of taxable income. Taxable income, not total income. And then we have this 10%, so it's broad, so we're not paying a very high tax bracket, and the rate of our liquid money filling up this container is pretty slow. And then once we fill up the 10%, now we start paying 12, and the liquid level rises a little faster. After we fill up the 12, the liquid level starts rising faster for every portion of liquid money we're putting in. But if we think about it kind of graphically like this, the amount of taxes that you owed is essentially the level of this funny looking container. Notice when you're paying 10%, the level goes up very slowly. The amount of taxes you pay is going up slowly. And then 12%, it goes faster. And then 22, it's faster. And 24%, yeah, you're paying 24% of those additional taxable dollars are going to the taxman. So we have this container, and it's important to understand how that works. But remember, you don't just have one of these for this year. You actually have one of these for every year of your life. And if you're looking at just using Roth contributions every year, all of your taxable dollars are going to be used, that liquid money is going to be allocated to these working years. Which means by the time you get to retirement years, you may not have any income that you've deferred that can be taxable. You may end up with unutilized 0% standard deductions or unutilized 10% tax brackets. And maybe visually you can just kind of see how it might be really beneficial if you took some of this 24 or 22% liquid money and you pushed it over here to 0 or 10. And again, from 2025, 26, all your working years, you can kind of spread it out across all of these future years. That's very beneficial. It can lead to a lower overall lifetime tax rate. It's not just about this year. We want to think about it for the totality of the plan for your entire lifetime. And being able to spread those taxes strategically across your life can be quite valuable. Now we'll shift back to eMoney, and we'll check out the second decision that we're going to analyze, which is how to save for the 3 children's college. And if you remember, by default, we were going to send $200 per month per child to a taxable investment account. But rather than sending money to the taxable account, we can turn that flow off and redirect that money to 529s for each of the 3 children. And the impact of that is substantial. That decision is essentially worth $42,000 present value. And again, it's no extra work. It's just a different automated process. Rather than automating cash flows to the taxable account, we're automating cash flows to a 529. No extra work, really. Just a better decision that has substantial impact. And the reason it has that positive impact is because 529s are tax sheltered accounts. If you send money to a taxable account and that money is going to have some sort of dividends, you have to pay taxes on those dividends every year. If it's in the 529, those dividend taxes are not relevant. If that money grows in the taxable account, when you do eventually sell to pay for college, you're going to have some sort of capital gains, which will be taxable. In the 529 account, there are no capital gains. So some substantial tax advantages of utilizing a 529 account. And you can see the overall impact of utilizing that, $42,000. Now, some of you might have noticed, yeah, there's a positive. We see the green positive impact on these years, but we're actually seeing a gray negative impact right here, showing in this year $40,000 negative impact. Um, and that's tricky. If you think you can figure out why we have this negative impact in these earlier years, pause the video now, think about it for a couple minutes. I'll give you a second. And if you figured it out, I'm very impressed. I did not figure it out. I had to dig into the eMoney reports and figure out what was going on. The answer is that a 529 is not considered John and Jane's assets. Those are assets which are being counted for the beneficiary, for the children. So by eMoney's counting, if they put $200 a month in a taxable account, that gets counted in John and Jane's balance sheet. But if they send $200 a month to a 529, eMoney is not counting that money in their balance sheet. So it's not real per se, but just the way eMoney treats 529s, it's actually showing that they have less money. However, when they start paying for college expenses, now they have an account that rather than drawing out of their own taxable account, they're able to draw out of these 529s. So that saves them substantial money out of their own pocket. Now we'll shift to decision 3. Let's go back to our base case. Okay, decision 3 is whether, remember the base case for decision 3 was investing in the Dow's low deductible medical plan. And then we'll explore what happens if we go with the high deductible medical plan. So that will change the amount of premiums, and that's what this button will do. And we'll also have the invest and max out in HSA, which is a health savings account, which can only be utilized through a high deductible medical plan. And note that this doesn't mean that they're investing more, because if they're able to invest the maximum into an HSA, which is currently about $8,300 for a family, they're going to have less excess money that will shift into the taxable account. So effectively what we're doing is we're shifting $8,300 a year from being invested in the taxable account into an HSA. But that HSA has much better tax characteristics. And the impact of that is large. Most people miss this, but utilizing a high deductible medical plan, the impact in this case is about $200,000. And again, just a choice, just a couple clicks of a button. This is no change in medical care. This is just a difference in the tax nature of your investments and how much you get charged for the medical care that you're using. And for both cases, they're using the exact same medical care. They have $5,000 of medical bills per year. So let's dig in a little deeper to why Dow's high deductible plan is so much better than the low deductible plan. This is for 2024. This is an employee plus spouse plus children. This is what would apply to John and Jane. It's set at $150,000 salary because remember, it's just the plan will be held in either John or Jane's plan for the entire family, and we're assuming non-tobacco user. So what this plot is showing is basically if we have this much in total medical bills, this much charges, this is John and Jane's responsibility. And the one thing that should jump out to you and grab you is that the high deductible plan, the gray line, is always below the low deductible plan, the orange line. There's not a whole lot of guarantees, but the way these medical plans are set up is the high deductible plan under every possible scenario for John and Jane with this family plan and their situation is that the high deductible plan always costs less than the low deductible plan. And that's a big deal. Now for John and Jane, we assume $5,000 of medical bills every year. So it puts them right here. And they're saving about $1,500 a year in medical spending because of that. But notice if John and Jane are really lucky and they have a healthy year, no one goes to the doctor, everything just works out perfectly, they can actually save quite a bit more. You could save $4,000 a year. And then there's the catastrophic end. And hopefully this never happens, but these situations do happen. Uh, let's say a family's having a child and there's some complications and they spend a week or even longer in the NICU. Uh, or there's a major surgery and some complications. And it doesn't take very many days in a hospital to start getting to some very large medical bills. And as you can see, the maximum out of pockets that you can hit between these two plans is pretty substantial, roughly 10,000 to 18,000. More than $6,000 difference in the max out of pocket. So, about $8,700 difference in the maximum out of pocket. And the difference in the premiums is $4,668. Now, a lot of people, the reason they don't choose the high deductible plan is because it has a deductible of $4,000 rather than $375, and that higher deductible scares them off. Now, remember, a deductible is something that you might pay depending on if you use medical care. A premium is something that you will always pay, whether you use a penny of medical care or not. The premiums are automatically deducted from a paycheck. They are always paid. So I can understand how a $4,000 deductible can seem a little off-putting. But if we look at the big picture and say that, okay, I have a larger deductible with a high deductible plan, notice that you are guaranteed to save those premiums. The premium you will always pay, and the deductible you might pay. And the premium being so much bigger, it makes this a much better plan. So if we look about this, let's look at the parts. So with the high deductible plan, we have about a $1,800 premium per year. And then after your premium, now we're hit the deductible phase where the first $4,000 is paid out of pocket. And then you have a cost sharing phase where you're paying 20% of medical charges up until you hit the maximum out of pocket. And that maximum out of pocket for a family is currently defined at $8,000. But notice this is not $8,000. This is $8,000 plus premiums, because premiums are not factored into the maximum out of pocket. If we look at that versus the low deductible plan, we start with the really large premiums for the year. We have this really small deductible of $375, and then we have a cost sharing of 15%. So it's a little flatter than the gray curve, but stays above until we get all the way to the maximum out of pocket. Maximum out of pocket would be $12,000, 8% of salary. And again, if we add the premiums on top of that, now we're at a number above $18,000 in a year. So back to John and Jane. As we said, this difference at $5,000 per year, remember that's their theoretical case we're using for the model, they save roughly $1,500. But they also have the HSA benefit. And an HSA is really powerful. And they're not saving more with the HSA. They're basically just putting now $8,300 in the HSA that otherwise would have gone into the taxable brokerage account. So it's in this pocket instead of that pocket. But the HSA has some really big tax benefits. The money you put into the HSA is tax deductible. So that $8,300 doesn't get taxed on their 2024 return. Any dividends growing in there will not get taxed. Once that money is removed and used for qualifying medical expenses, the gain on all that investment is not taxed. And in some cases, payroll taxes can also be avoided. And remember, this HSA, it invests just like a 401k, just like any investment account. You can put this in, pretty much any fund you want. It's invested just like everything else, except it's shielded from taxation. There is no taxes on the front end, the back end, or in the middle for these HSAs. It's really one of the great features that we're offered right now. And if you just think about, okay, $8,300, that avoids 22% marginal tax rate. That's almost $2,000 in tax benefit. And if we combine $2,000 of tax benefit with an additional $1,500 in lower medical spending, that's a big improvement. That's roughly $3,500 a year. And that's why we saw such a big difference when the John and Jane switched to the high deductible plan. Now that you understand the medical and the HSA a little better, we can see that in eMoney. So for 2024, there's a benefit about $757. But this is only a few months, right? We're in September at the time of this recording. The next year, that benefit jumps to $4,600. So you can see almost a $4,000, let's call it $3,850 improvement, $3,850 advantage in 1 year. And as we said, it's $1,500 lower in medical, roughly $2,000 on the tax side, because that money, the $8,300 that they contribute, avoids 22% marginal tax. So you can see, and then the next year, the benefit more than $5,000, and then so on. Remember, this is all compounding because that HSA is invested in stocks and it's growing, and that advantage grows and grows and grows and grows over time. By the time you look at it a lifetime, this is why you've got an impact of $200,000 in today's present value. So a really, really important thing. And the last thing we're going to look at in this case study is, what if we do some Roth conversions? So we've looked at conversions to the 10%, to the 12, to the 22, and the one that would make the most sense for John and Jane is the 12%. So if you remember the base case, they were contributing to the Roth. So you really can't do conversions if everything's already been to Roth. We need some pre-tax money in order to do conversions. So if we do the pre-tax, you see they have a value gained of roughly $200,000. This is one of the really important things that they should consider. And if we do Roth conversions as well, this number changes from $197,000 to about $206,000. So, roughly $10,000 reduced taxes from that, from using some 12% Roth conversions. Not an enormous difference, but it's something to consider. So when they get to those retirement years, that's what we're going to look at. Do Roth conversions make sense? Sometimes the answer is no, sometimes the answer is yes, but hey, if it's going to save them money, why not? That's the fourth thing. And if we look at everything together, all four of these decisions, and remember, none of this is really extra work. It's just different choices, different mouse clicks. That impact is huge. Roughly $500,000 of inefficiency in these four choices. And this sort of reminds me of the work smarter, not harder philosophy. These are some really important decisions. Impacts of $500,000. It's really important to get these right. And that's where the value of financial planner can come into place, is they can evaluate these for you. These are not always intuitive, but they're really important. So seeking out some expert help can be really helpful for some of these cases. The last thing I want to show is, when we looked at these Roth conversions, it had an impact of about $10,000 when we looked at them alone. Now, the thing with financial planning is that everything kind of depends on everything else. So we tried to look at these four scenarios independently, but if you add them up, you're not going to get this same number. It's just not the way it works. And this Roth conversion had a roughly $9,000-$10,000 impact. But if we have these other things happening at the same time as the Roth, you see $496 to $456. So now you can see the Roth conversions actually have a $40,000 impact when everything is all done together. And that's just kind of how the numbers work. It can get a little tricky. Everything does depend on everything. And that's where this financial planning software like eMoney can really shine. And if you're curious how much this is at an actual value rather than present value, so how much difference it'll be in the future, there you go. Almost $1.8 million of impact by making the better decisions. for John and Jane on these four choices. But then again, I do think the present value is a little easier for us to wrap our heads around. $500,000 equivalent of today. But, $500,000, what sort of impact does that have on John and Jane? That can make some real differences in someone's life. They could be able to retire a little earlier if they choose. They could be able to go on a special trip. It might help them support their children in college and do extra things that are important to them, right? $500,000 is a lot of impact. And notice what we didn't talk about in this presentation. We didn't talk just about investing in stocks, because that's not really where the value is. We didn't mention NVIDIA. We didn't talk about Tesla or Netflix or whatever else is hot. That's not how you get there. It's not by choosing the right stocks. It's by making the right decisions. And most of that impact, or much of that impact, often comes from the tax side. There's a lot of nuance, a lot of things that people don't take full advantage of in the tax code. And the software is really good at helping us find those things. And combined with the knowledge of the tax code, we can really find a lot of those opportunities to improve client outlooks. And let's face it, most people don't understand the tax code all that great. Most people don't have a whole lot of interest in understanding it that great. But that is where a lot of the value is. And working with a financial planner can help identify some of that value and really help you out. And as you see, it's not investments. It's about making the right decisions. Okay, now let's just wrap up with the takeaways. Seemingly small financial decisions can make very large impacts. I suspect many of you were surprised by just how much impact some of these decisions make. You may have thought, it wasn't a big deal, but in some cases, yes, it can be a very big deal. Financial planning software can quantify the impact of decisions and improve decision making. So with financial planner's knowledge, sometimes we think option A is the best option, or we're not sure, maybe B, maybe C. With financial planning software, we don't have to think. We can actually test, we can quantify, we can know what is the best thing for your particular situation. And if we see something surprising, we can dig deeper and deeper into it and learn and essentially make the best possible plan for you. Taxes play a huge role in wealth building, but that can be mitigated with strategic planning. So yes, we do have to pay taxes, but we also get some control in when we pay those taxes, whether we do Roth 401k or pre-tax, how we withdraw our retirement accounts, or whether we choose to do Roth conversions. Those are choices that we do get to make. And if we can be strategic with those choices, we can choose the arrangement that allows us to pay the lowest amount of taxes that ultimately benefits you the most. And lastly, working with an objective fiduciary financial planner can be a valuable investment. Yes, working with a professional can be expensive. It's likely to cost several $1,000s. But as you can see in John and Jane's case, you could say that's really a very valuable investment. The impact that we can make for John and Jane far outweighs the cost of what they would pay a financial planner. So if you guys haven't visited the website yet, scientific-financial.com, go check it out. You'll see that the website's very transparent. All of the pricing is there. And if you want to chat, I've got several meeting buttons. Just click one, schedule a 30-minute meeting. Look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.